Welcome to Oppsell, where top sales legends reveal the playbooks they hardly ever share. With your host, Wilson DK.
Sales solution experts. It's real talk, real strategy.
And it's starting now.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Oppsell Podcast. Our guest today, Charles Idem, is a master of African market expansion. Armed with an economist's eye and a consultant's precision, he's driving double-digit growth for a leading payment platform, a leading payment unicorn, and now co-founds Start Button, simplifying cross-border compliance, payments across Africa, all the works. Charles blends data-driven rigor with on-the-ground insights, building sales teams that smash quota and unlock new regions. So if you want the blueprint for winning in the emerging markets, stay tuned. Charles Idem, welcome to the Oppsell Podcast.
Thank you so much, Wilson. Thanks for that very generous introduction. Sometimes when you hear things like this, you're like, is that really me someone is talking about? But more than appreciate that. And looking forward to having this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I know, if you because you've been going so far and you're trying to cover grounds and hit those milestones, you'd be amazed how far you've come and the impact you've left behind. And that's why it's also imperative for us to have conversations like this, where people that aspire to get into this career get insights, get inspirations, and the know-hows to excel in the career, just as you're doing. I know they're still getting to the destination, of course, with what you started in a couple of months, years back. And it's good to have more conversations with you. And thank you for being here.
More than happy to. Thank you so much.
Okay, let's get into it. So can you give us a brief introduction about yourself? Then we get into the questions.
Sure, happy to do that. Yes. So as you said, my name is Charles Idem. So I'm a sales professional, sort of startup founder today or co-founder today. So background, Nigerian, born and raised, Lagos. So you and I go way back. We went to secondary school, or others call high school together years ago in King's College.
Yes.
And then I studied economics for my bachelor's and started my career in consulting. So management consulting. Interestingly enough, it was a startup at the time. And so we punched above our weight a little bit, did strategy, market, research projects in different industries, so across telecoms, retail, banking, and I did that for a few years before moving to actually start my own consulting firm with a friend. So I realized early on that I wasn't going to do consulting for a very long time, and I wanted to do something different. Technology was what I had always dreamt of doing, because growing up, I think we came of age. We sort of came of age when around the time of the dot-com bubble, when the first set of tech companies were. I won't say the first set of tech. There was the IBMs and the Xeroxes earlier, but then the Google and the MySpace and PayPal's of the 2000s. We came of age around that time, and so I was inspired by that. So I wanted to do tech, when I realized I was going to do consulting for the long term, quickly I started thinking about, okay, how do I just go for what I've always wanted to do, and one thing led to another, and I stumbled on sales. I like to say that sales was an accidental plan for me, and I got into an enterprise software company, so started selling enterprise software. Was hired as territory manager to sell that in Africa. So did that for a little bit, and then made the transition into startups. And then eventually got to Paystack, which was the company I worked for before what I'm doing now, and then eventually landed here at Start Button, where I'm the chief commercial officer and co-founder. So that's roughly my background, sort of professional and a bit of personal as well.
Yeah, sure. Yes, of course, we do go way back. It's always nice to catch up with people, the KCO boys, like we call ourselves,
Yes.
and see how far we've come. Is quite inspiring, your journey, especially seeing that you came up with an economics background, now delved into management consulting, right? So I'd like to ask, just holding on to that, In what ways has the analytical foundation influenced your current approach to selling technology solutions? Seeing blending the MC, that's management consulting, know-how and skills that you picked up, and of course studying economics. How have they, influenced the current approach to selling technology solutions?
Yeah. So it's been a massive influence for me, to be honest. And I think, if anything, it prepared me a lot for selling at the level, at which I sell and I have sold. So economics. So as if you're familiar, sort of the study of economics, social science. People who go into economics. Like when I was in secondary school, I didn't realize how complex economics was until I got into university, and you have things like econometrics. You're doing calculus, like you're doing, other analysis, like deep analysis, in other subjects. So I think the rigor that I picked up from studying economics was something that has been very instrumental and has been very helpful in selling today. And that now sort of going into management consulting now elevated that to another level, because in consulting, you're doing analysis as the core of what you're doing. You're looking at businesses, you're looking at situations, market situations, market conditions for companies, for your clients, and you're trying to really find answers, right, to questions. And so there's a lot of problem solving rigor, there's a lot of critical thinking that is involved. So all the training I got, from studying economics and working in consulting has really, really impacted just the way I think fundamentally. And that has helped me approach selling with more depth, so being able to think deeply about sort of the problems you're solving for customers and the opportunity that is in front of you with respect to a potential customer. Just being able to, leverage the sort of frameworks and concepts that one has picked up over time. So in consulting, you're taught early on to, that there are a lot of sort of conceptual frameworks that we use, like the pyramid principle, or things like mind maps or decision trees, right? All those concepts, sort of over time, I've been able to bring them to bear in sort of trying to in selling, especially with enterprise sales, right, where you're trying to navigate very, very highly competitive sales situations, right? So those sort of conceptual backgrounds have really, really been instrumental in just setting me apart in some ways and helping me to excel at what I do. I think I've seen that also not just work for me, but for other people, right? People who have come into the organizations that I've worked for, peers, colleagues who have had a similar background, like where folks went through any form of training that involves just sort of deep, rigorous thinking. They've been able to apply that, and the results always show, right? And so I've been lucky. I was lucky to have had that background, and it's stood me in good stead overall, in terms of just making me do the work, a lot of the pre-work, do that better, and do it, to a very high level of excellence, right? And then the next thing is now how you now manage the human elements, like the human relational elements, right? But it helps you cover the bases, on sort of the analytical side, and that has been really, really good. I've seen the results in my career.
So like, I'll think that there has to be a mindset transition, having that shift from consulting, especially consulting, to a dynamic, ever-growing, ever-changing, ever-evolving African fintech ecosystems. So now let's talk about the mindset transitioning, right? So what motivated your shift from consulting to dynamic environments of the African tech sales? What were the key or the most significant challenges that you encountered during this transitioning? Having taken off that hat of a consultant and dabbling into the ecosystem of African tech sales, especially as it's vibrant, it's thriving, and it's ever evolving, because it looks like you're having this, getting into a green field where there are no predominant technologies. We're just adopting technologies and building that technology from the ground up, as against retrofitting old technologies with new technologies. So how did that mindset transition work for you, and what were the challenges that you encountered during that transitioning?
Sure. So I would say that, first of all, in terms of the mindset shift, it was pretty straightforward, because I'd gotten to the point where I sort of knew that I wasn't going to do consulting for the long term. So I just had to mentally prepare myself for what was next, right? But then it wasn't a linear path from consulting to fintech. So there was a stop along the way. So like I mentioned, I sold enterprise software for a few multinationals. So when I left consulting, when I made that transition, I got hired by an enterprise software company that sold sort of digital automation software for large corporations, so banks, telcos, large in the heavy industry. And so the first challenge I had, right, was figuring out how to navigate selling in Africa, period, to large enterprises, right? That was the first challenge, right? And I was privileged to have worked in the UK. I was like, so the company I worked for, I was hired in the UK, and I worked there for a few years before moving back to Africa. And so I was exposed to the environment in the UK where, let's say the UK and globally to a large extent, where the economies are more advanced. Folks approach, it's part and parcel of sort of the business, how they do business, right? Buying software is part and parcel of how those companies in the UK do business. They look at it from the perspective of acquiring capabilities and gaining a competitive advantage, because software that does X can help you increase your revenue, can help you reduce costs. So the mindset there is very clear, like where software is an investment or technology is an investment, and we're investing in future growth. They do R&D or research or whatever, corporate strategy planning, and to achieve whatever goals they've come up with, software is a key element, or or a key catalyst to enable them achieve those goals. And so the mindset is very much one of, we're investing and we'll see the results in the future. So in selling software to folks, the conversation dovetails, because you're just latching onto what they already think and believe internally, right? And then you're running with that. But in Africa, it wasn't the same, right? Yes, to a large extent, folks look at it as an investment, but there's a keen eye on costs more than like sort of generating revenue. So folks look at, do I have to spend this money, right? Even if budgets have been allocated for certain investments, the question is like those investments have to be justified to the T more than you see in other parts of the world. So I would say that it's the two key challenges that stand out for me. First of all, were the cultural sort of dynamics, so where people just didn't really look at selling software as even catalyst. They looked at it more as a resource that if they had an alternative for, they could forgo that resource and not necessarily make that buying decision. And then there's just a risk aversion, right? That we have in Africa that is higher than you see in other parts of the world. Right? Folks think first, like, okay, if I do this now and it doesn't work, what happens? I'm like, especially if you're spending $1 million, for a large company, you buy something for $1 million, that deployment fails, your job is on the line, and so people are more risk averse. So those were some of the challenges I encountered, and I think I'll say the third thing was just like, again, similar to link to the point of culture is just trust. Like, folks are more skeptical in Africa, right? So you as a salesperson, you show up at an organization, you pitch to them, and you try to sell. It takes time for them to warm up to you, and so like, who's this guy? What's he coming to pitch to us? Like, but in the West, they're used to it. So you go, you pitch. It's easier to sort of start building rapport and going from there. So I think that was something that I also encountered. So just moving from enterprise software into fintech, I saw those dynamics at play still, right? And but then there was a slight difference in the sense that especially with what I sold, which is payments, right? The business model is SaaS, right, to a large extent. So we were not requiring customers to pay upfront, right? So they were not making a huge capital investment upfront. Whereas when I was selling enterprise software, they were making that capital investment. So because we didn't need them to pay upfront, that eased the conversation, made it easier. Like, we would just say to people, we don't earn money until you sell. We're making a fee, a cut off the transaction, the transaction fee of what we process for you. So those conversations were a bit easier, but still you had those challenges of, okay, the risk aversion starts to kick in as well. Okay, so you versus the other guy. Or am I better using a legacy system that I'm familiar with, that I know, even my board or my C-suite understands this legacy system versus you, this upstart who is showing up and telling me that, your APIs are more, easier to consume and implement. Your checkout is fancy, stuff like that. So we encountered those similar challenges even in the fintech space. But I think for me, it was as soon as I knew that this was what I wanted to do, and one of the reasons I made that mental shift was that I realized early on in my consulting career that you can, selling is fundamental to every business. There's
Absolutely.
there's no scenario, people don't even realize it, that even in a family setting, kids you show up to your parents and you sell to them why they should pay for you to go and either play sports or do piano lessons or swimming. You're selling to your parents in some sense, right? But then in a corporate setting, you're selling in almost every scenario, whether you're talking to colleagues in one department or the other. So I realized when I was doing consulting that while we were doing the analytical work, our managing partner, our founding partners, they were selling. And that was the way that that's business development. You can't grow a business without them selling at that level. So, and I had designs or ambitions on being sort of a business owner. So I said, okay, if that's a key skill that is needed to grow a business, then I need to have that skill. So I should probably just park this thing. I've learned enough technical stuff like that I needed to learn. And I should go and try out this thing and see if I can build expertise in it.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, fun fact, I also started my career as a consultant with a big four firm. I did that for almost 2 years, and I said, okay, no, I understand. Just the same way you were. Now, I always thought selling is essential. You always sell. As you're on this earth, you're breathing, you're selling and negotiating your way all through the 24 hours of the day, right? And I feel that that's an essential skill. If I'm doing that unknowingly, then there's a career to it, because like you rightly said, the partners, the managing partners of these consulting firms have to sell their services to bring business in, right? So if that is a key skill, like you succinctly put in there, I believe, and I also believe that, look, I had to get this key skill. I have to delve into it and make the most of it. And that's, that's something I went to put in there. And just a fun fact as well, as I moved out from management consulting, I also went into enterprise platform sales, ERP solutions. So I did that for a couple of years before also moving in and delving into what I'm doing so far. So that's thank
a lot of similarities between us.
Tons of similarities, and that's good to know. So let's move on a bit now, and we're talking about talent acquisition and culture. So what are the specific indicators that you prioritize when you're assembling high performance sales teams that focus on the African SMEs and enterprises?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because man, you can't achieve anything without having a good team, right? Whether it's a sales team or whether it's a company, right? And I've learned just in my brief career of maybe, I don't know, almost 20 years now, that you're only as good as the team and the people you have around you. So, and that, I think there's no way of overstating that, right? So, what to look out for is very, very, very crucial. So I learned. So the indicators that I've adopted or that I sort of look out for. I learned from sort of a sales expert that I learned about years ago. So there's a book called so the name is escaping me now, but when it comes back to me, I'll share it. John McMahon is the guy's name. When it comes to me, anyway, he says that there's certain things that you have to look out for. So coachability, heart, and desire are three things that he talks about. But above that, and I think he also sort of mentioned it, integrity is the first thing, right? And I look at that as, if sales is very challenging, right? So if you don't have integrity, you're gonna be you'll be faced with very difficult situations where you have to sort of, like, you might be tempted to compromise. And compromising can mean reporting the wrong numbers or just trying to forge data to make things look good, or when the reality is not as rosy. So I think integrity is the first thing that I sort of try to look out for, and it's hard to measure because, like, people will come into interviews and tell you what you want to hear. But if you're able to sort of look at people's track record and try to sort of understand what motivates them, then you might get a sense of sort of where what sort of their values are, and how that would work or fit with your own values within your company, and if they're a good fit. And so that leads me to the second thing, which is motivation. I always like to ask people, in fact, when I interview people, I like to know their background. What did they do? Or what did they set out to do when they were growing up, right? I like to understand a bit of the personal. So where did they go to school? Where were they born? What were the sort of early influences that they had? And all that leads up to motivation. So what is the motivation for doing what they're doing today? And why do they even want to continue on that path or join a certain company, the company that I work for, that I'm interviewing them for? And so with that, on an understanding of that motivation, you sort of know whether they're ready for the challenge at hand, because the different roles offer different challenges. And so if you're coming into a sales role, you better be prepared for it, because every 90 days you need to put points on the board. And if you don't put those points on the board 90 days, 180 days on the full year, it's you have some very tough conversations. So you understanding the motivation is another important thing. And then I think just technical knowledge, going back to the first question you asked me about sort of consulting, what sort of lessons or skills did I take away? I like to understand. I mean, at the base level, folks need to be technically competent, right? You need to know how to do what you do. Like, the analogy I like to use is like, if you're an engineer or an architect, like, you understand how to draw lines, you understand how to measure, like, you just know the basics of your basic rules of foundational, sort of rules of your profession. So you can't be an engineer working on civil projects, building bridges and stuff, and not just know, how to, like, literally measure things, not understand physics and just chemical compositions of elements and stuff like that. So, taking that into my own domain, I like to sort of know whether these guys have the grounding, like the technical grounding for the role. Do you know what it means to qualify? Do you know what a champion is? Do you know, how to forecast? Like, if you don't even know what those concepts are, then you're not ready, right? Do you know what gatekeepers are? Do you know even sales, like gates, like sales gates? Okay, what triggers are you looking for when you're talking to people? How do you do discovery, right? So when you sort of are able to assess them for that, you can then determine, okay, if this person could be a good fit or not. And then discipline is another thing that I highly prioritize, because again, you're running against the clock, right? You have quota, you have sort of deliverables that you're accountable for, and so you need to be disciplined to ensure that you're able to, meet those objectives. And then I think, similar to what I said again, John McMahon, the name of the book is The Qualified Sales Leader. It just came back to me.
Yeah, the qualified sales leader.
Exactly. The curiosity and hunger are two other things that he talks about. And I think I found that that's also very, very, those are traits or sort of indicators that are very, very important, because if someone is curious, they will go the extra mile. And then if someone is also hungry, they will even go further. Like, this was something that early on in my career, I learned by just being a sponge and hungry for knowledge. And I would go to my managing partner at the time and ask questions. And every time I went to ask questions, this guy gave me more work. And the more work I took on, the more I learned, the more I was able to build skills quickly and sort of, grow and excel. So hunger is also something I look for. People who, they are ready to just stay the course, do the work, and just soak up, as much information and knowledge as is available for them to soak up. And so when I put all these things together, I then say, okay, if and obviously there are other things that you sort of test for, you have specific case studies or scenarios that you're testing for. But if I put all this together, I feel like it gives me a rounded view of the ideal person to work with or to be a part of the team that I either lead or that I'm a part of. And putting that into practice over the years, has again served me well. I've worked with brilliant people who have gone above and beyond, and we've had some great leaders together. And I still apply that today, and seeing the results from it.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. It's quite important. You did mention a couple of things. One thing that's also stuck with me is, having the know-how. You need to have a technical know-how, the baseline technical know-how, right?
Absolutely.
And the motivation has to be there. You also need to be hungry.
Yep.
You can have the know-how, but if you're not hungry, it's what it is. You won't give your utmost best. You will not put your back to it 120%. So that is it. The hunger, the curiosity, and we will blend of the know-how. That gets in.
Yes. And just another point I was going to make is that the motivation is also very important for the rejections that you get.
Yes.
Because all those times you get no's. And we're not buying from you. There are more no's than yeses.
Yes.
But the whole idea is that you have enough yeses that you overachieve your target, and it sort of makes it worth all the no's. So that motivation is very important.
Very important. I agree, and you have to have a thick skin. Always have a thick skin, because you're going to get tons of no's.
Absolutely.
You could have like a very barren season, a barren streak of no's, and if you don't have a thick skin, if you don't have your motivation, the why, and the hunger, that would also carry you on when the no's are raining down, and till you get to the promised land of the yeses and So that's very good. Thanks for sharing that as well. So let's move on again, and we're looking at you from operator to entrepreneur. After successfully, you just mentioned that you've led sales teams, you've been part of sales teams, especially when you were with Paystack and the other businesses and organizations you're working with, and now you are doing something with Start Button. You're the co-founder of Start Button. So I'd like to ask, after successfully leading sales efforts, what personal challenges prompted you to co-found Start Button to assist companies in establishing and expanding, their presence all across Africa?
Yeah, thanks. That's another very good question. So, I would say that the motivation for what I'm doing today came from a frustration that I encountered in my previous role. So, we sold payments solutions to companies, and locally in different countries where we operated. But one of the challenges we experienced due to regulatory requirements was that we couldn't work with global companies. So a lot of companies that were not locally incorporated, we couldn't serve them because guidelines, so regulatory guidelines required us to only onboard companies that were locally registered or that had local bank accounts. So I encountered that frustration where there were, there were great companies that we spoke to that we couldn't onboard because of this regulatory issue. And so we tried to actually solve the problem at the time. We tried workarounds within the framework, within the sort of the bank rules that existed at the time to onboard these companies, but it just didn't work out. At every point where we came up with some creative idea and we made an approach and we said, okay, let's try it this way, let's try it that way, it just didn't work. So at the end, and I saw the dollar signs from some of those deals. That like that, if I had signed those deals, I knew where I would have landed and my team would have landed, in terms of our quota. So just walking away from those deals was very hard, and I was like, but we had to do it, and I figured, a way to figure out a way to sort of balance it in the end. But then it just got me thinking that this is an opportunity here, that is an opportunity that can be solved. Like there's a problem here that someone can solve, and so one thing led to another. And my co-founder, who sort of is CEO at start, but we worked together at the time. In fact, we worked together on these problems. He was, he's a lawyer by training, so he had the sort of legal background, in helping us sort of find ways to navigate those issues. And so, we just kept talking about what the possibilities were for solving this problem that we saw, and one thing led to another, and we both sort of struck out with our other third co-founder, who's the CTO, set out to go and then run Start Button. And so we launched it to essentially help businesses expand across Africa, but also localize their offering in terms of offer customers the ability to access whatever global services are available to people in other regions, to be able to access it locally and not have the friction of paying in foreign currency and stuff like that. So that's essentially the story of Start Button. I think that for me, I just saw that need, and I was convinced that there's value to be unlocked here. Like if we can solve this problem, right? Yeah. There's value to be unlocked for both consumers and for the businesses. For the global businesses, businesses are always looking for chasing growth, right? And there's a latent market here that is unlocked, and so only if there's a way to sort of open up that market can they then access it and grow from it. And for the consumers, there's just a ton of opportunities. Like one of the challenges that we face in Africa is that we're always last to the party, right? You have, PayPal has not even till today. PayPal is not available in Africa. So imagine if young innovative Africans didn't take it upon themselves to build our own payment solutions. So today we not have now you can't count the number of wallets, digital wallets, and solutions that exist and folks can use them, right? So unlocking that opportunity for consumers here just makes a world of a difference, because you can imagine there will be ed tech services, there will be content services that people would not have been able to access, or so today can't even still access because some of the services are not available to us. But by bridging that gap, we enable people to access those services, and those services could be instrumental to them personally from a growth standpoint. Whether they want to leverage those services to learn a skill or learn a trade, or they even want to leverage them to apply themselves to doing something. And so what we're doing is helping to unlock that, and I think that's what's gratifying for me, and that's what I feel like I'm motivated to keep doing this. So yeah, it makes a world of a difference.
Yeah, and I must say, you've taken up and covered so much ground since you started up the Start Button. It's amazing what you're trying to do to bridge that gap. And of course, Africa is about 54 countries, fragmented. It's still difficult to do transactions together, and it's amazing that your product and your services to bridge that gap. Bring all those fragments into one whole and make Africa a huge, giant marketplace where It is seamless,
Exactly.
easy to make
Exactly.
transactions and of course share goods and services all across seamlessly and easily.
Absolutely.
So yeah, looking forward to know how you're expanding, and I'm following your journey closely because there's a lot to learn.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, great. Yeah, now let's look at the future of African fintech sales. Yeah. What macro trends do you foresee shaping enterprise purchasing behavior in the African technology sector over the next 5 years?
Okay, I have another very, very good question. I think fundamentally, I think that the number one trend, macro trend, still remains the macroeconomic conditions of African countries. Like, I think growth and distribution of wealth remains the key thing that will shape or influence the sort of trajectory of sort of enterprise sales and sales across different verticals, including fintech, right? Because unless there's prosperity, right? If the country, if economies are not growing and wealth is not being distributed, purchasing power is limited, and that creates a risk, and in fact that creates a scenario where economies are just stagnant and businesses can't grow, they can't thrive, right? So the first thing is like we just honestly we just need to grow in Africa across, like, Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, everybody needs to grow, because it's only when these economies grow that companies are motivated to spend and invest, and then consumers as well can purchase. Like, they have disposable income to then go and spend on things that are not survival related, right? And that impacts, there has a sort of a ripple effect across the economy, for both households and businesses. So that's I think the key trend. But beyond that, I think AI, obviously, AI is something that is game changing, and with, as things are unfolding, AI is definitely going to impact almost every sphere of human life, if not every sphere of human life, because business models are just going to change very quickly, right? With the advent of AI and the shift to sort of agent-based AI sort of services, right? Companies are going to be disrupted, just like the way services are delivered. So like, because as we've seen, like across, banking already, like everybody has an AI bot that is available, like, that's there, like, and even consumer services, from the ones like we use to chat or whatever, like the agents are emerging, and they're there to sort of perform tasks and make life easy for consumers or users of digital services. So that is also fundamentally, I think, going to change or impact the way folks, like, enterprise sales is done, and the way even services like software services are delivered, right? And so folks are going to have to think about what that impact is going to look like. And it's also, you're going to see that in fintech as well, if you're not already seeing it. In fact, I'm spoken to people who are already building solutions like that across different functions. Like, I think someone I was talking to a few months ago is building an agent-based AI service for onboarding employees, like within companies, onboarding and offboarding. So, the HR manager or the HR team just needs to configure the onboarding and offboarding tasks in the software, and then the AI agent does that. So when an employee leaves, the offboarding is done by the agent. When the employee joins, the same thing. Like, so you see that across fintech as well, and across different functions within, sort of the fintech, within an organization, but even within the fintech stack as well. And then I think another trend that I think could impact sort of the way enterprise sales fintech will operate over the next few years is currency.
Yeah.
So both fiat currency and cryptocurrency. I think, again, tied to the first point I made about just economic growth, I think currency volatility in Africa has been something that has impacted sales, software sales or technology sales over the last 20 years, because we've seen it, like whenever there has been a recession or whenever there's been like a commodity crisis in Africa, the African corporations draw back, like they spend less, they cut their IT budgets, they cut software budgets because they want to get dollars become more expensive. So they want to just hold on to, the local currency that they have and only spend where it's unavoidable, right? So if we continue to have currency crises, if local currencies are not stable over the next few years, we'll still see that impact on sort of enterprise software sales or sort of procurement of software or hardware or technology overall. And then now with stable cryptocurrencies sort of becoming a bit more mainstream, there's been recently, in the US, probably seen the Genius Act that Donald Trump signed over the weekend.
Yes.
That signals a massive shift, right? If I know your other regions, Europe, Asia, may not be as advanced yet, but then if the US is leading in that direction, other folks will also be looking at it closely, right? So with cryptocurrency becoming a bit more mainstream, I think there's definitely going to be some impact there on just how organizations and even in Africa, like we're seeing regulations coming to the fore now, like the different regulators in a lot of countries, like they've made the right moves to sort of create a regulatory framework to regulate cryptocurrency. So that's also going to impact the whole technology landscape, because if folks can, like if cryptocurrency it's no longer as fringe as it was and becomes a bit more mainstream, and you can easily transition from fiat to crypto, then that might change the dynamics in terms of how quickly or how sort of effectively people can invest or spend to procure technology. And then I think the last thing I would say is that just cloud and just with the trends in cloud and SaaS, I think that will also have an impact, because SaaS business, like just the business model, the SaaS business model makes it easier for folks to justify some technology investments, right? If you're not investing $1 million, $2 million capex, and you're spending $10,000, $20,000 a month, and then that compounds to $120,000 a year, it's more palatable. You might be more willing to buy software because, again, you can match the expense to your revenue. If money is coming in a month and you're earning 200,000, okay, you can think, okay, maybe I can spend 10% of my revenue on this technology. But if someone is requiring you to bring $2 million today, and you're thinking, okay, how long does it take me to make $2 million, and I had to go and put it in one technology investment? It might not be a decision that one will make too easily. So I think the SaaS business models will definitely continue to shape or influence technology, the buying behavior in the tech or the fintech space. And then there's a lot of competition that is sort of emerging, right? You have local data centers emerging, and folks are building cloud infrastructure on the continent.
Yes.
And they're going to be rivaling the traditional giants, the AWSs of this world. So there'll be pricing competition that should be beneficial for companies, right, in terms of reducing cost. And that also plays a role in sort of influencing how people will approach investing in technology over the next few years. So those are some of the things that I see from my own standpoint.
Yeah, I mean that's packed, and I only see that it's forward and onwards and forwards for the African ecosystem, the African tech space. There are a lot of things, but one thing that needs to be gotten right, like you said, is the currency liquidity. The more there is fluidity in terms of currency, the more it is to adopt technology. And of course now with Genius Act that has come to the fore. The thing about Africa is that Africa, we didn't our fiat systems were not really fiat systems per se, because it was fragmented. We couldn't get to the underserved, and cryptocurrency has come to plug that hole, to fill that gap quickly. So this is I won't be surprised to see that there's going to be a lot of adoption, a quicker adoption in Africa than any other market right after United States. So the future looks very, very bright for the continent if we keep playing our cards well, keep doing the investments, and keep towing the path that we're trying to tow, especially from the entrepreneurs, the founders, trying to be so creative to come up with solutions and technology platforms that could bridge this gap and solve problems as quickly as possible. So it's an exciting couple of years, I was saying. Next 5 years, next 10 years. Africa looks like we're going to the top. I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing about innovation. Like, you can't, innovators and entrepreneurs will always find solutions, right? So whatever makes it, when they face obstacles, they can look for ways around those obstacles, and stuff like things like cryptocurrencies. It's exactly that. It's like an innovation that makes it easier, right, to transact. Like, it gives you a different type of currency that you can leverage to achieve whatever you want to achieve. So like you said, very exciting few years ahead, and it needs to be seen how it unfolds.
Yeah. So the one more question before we wrap it up. I'd like to ask, what would you advise young people that are looking to get into sales, or people in sales already and want to be better salespersons? What kind of advice do you have for them? Can you share it with us right now?
Sure, happy to. So, for folks looking to get into sales, I would say that you can't go wrong with getting into sales, right? Regardless of the industry, right? And I think if you even think about it, most of the guys, in other industries that we admire, even looking, starting from home, like in Nigeria, a lot of the challenger bankers, in terms of the individuals, right? The guys who challenge the established banks, they were salespeople, right? The likes of Access Bank, the likes of GTB, likes of Senate, those guys went and challenged the established order and were able to sell, their own institutions. So I would say that go into it, have a plan, try and understand what it means for you as a person, right? And where exactly you fit in. Like, obviously you have to understand like your strengths and weaknesses as a person first, because the sales is not for everybody. Different people are cut out. Some people are cut out for it, some people are not cut out for it. So you have to know your strengths and weaknesses. But have a plan, think through the plan, and position yourself to be able to learn, and then understand that I think it was Bill Gates, or I can't remember if it was the guy who wrote Outliers, that said, like, if you plan in decades, like it's better to plan in decades. Like, you take a longer time frame or time horizon to plan, and then you execute in sort of short-term cycles. That's better. So have a plan, think about it long term, 5 to 10 years. Like, where do you see yourself? What skills do you want to acquire, and how do you want to grow up, to rise up the ladder? I think that would go ahead and execute that plan. That would be the way to go. And similar for folks who are already in the field, like, have a goal. Like, where do you want to get to? Right? You want to be a VP? Do you want to be a chief revenue officer? Do you want to be a CEO or an entrepreneur? Whatever you want to be, that you have to know what it takes to get there, right? And again, talk to people, have mentors, people who have gone through the journey already and who are now at the other side. I think people are willing to share as long as they know, like, that you really value their time and value your own time as well, right? If you approach people and you're able to articulate whatever needs you have, I'm sure people will be willing to open up to you and tell them, right, like what they did in their own time to get to where they are. So, just having that plan and roadmap, staying the course in terms of the execution, is very key, because at the end of the day, you're only as good as what you've done, and you only do good work if you're given the opportunity to do good work. You can't get, there's a like whatever level you are at, right? You cannot get work that is greater than that level. So it's only consistency that will get you to do work that is even bigger and that helps you build your skill sets, which is why you just have to have a plan to be able to grow. And yeah, that's it. Once you do that, I think, or once they do that, they'll be in a good position.
Yeah, that's words of marble. That and thanks for that. Thanks
Thank
for that.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So if the audience listening or watching this would like to connect with you, where can they connect with you? Where's your digital footprint that you are easily accessible to? Can you share where?
Yeah, sure. I'm on LinkedIn. So
Okay.
Charles Idem on LinkedIn. That's the best place to get me. I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. So yeah, message me, connect with me. Always very responsive there. And yeah, happy to engage and build and extend my network, expand my network, and get to meet more people out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Charles's LinkedIn link or profile will be on the show notes. So do well to go in, subscribe, and look at the fantastic work he's doing with the start button and get to know more about it. Yeah. Charles, this has been a very, very informative conversation. Thank you for sharing this with us. And to the folks and listeners out there, thank you for your time. From me on here, it is bye. Charles, you want to say any parting words or anything?
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, Wilson, and all the best for the folks who've listened in. We appreciate you. It's always great with all the content out there. You know, you're choosing to listen to this podcast and to come to this platform. You have to say that we appreciate it. So yeah, all the best to everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Charles, for that, and thanks everyone. See you all in the next one. Bye for now, guys. Bye, Charles.
Cheers. Yeah, bye.